Jericho.
You're confused, Dad. Let me handle the accounts before someone robs you.
The only hands I'm removing from my money are yours.
$600,000 in this old place. Be practical. Sell, move, be safe.
Safety isn't for sale. Not today!
Coercion attempt logged. Trust activated. Independent trustees in control.
Effective immediately.
3 aliases, 2 prior elders targeted. Patterns don't lie.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to fix this. You fix it by not breaking it.
I don't need your money, I need your honor.
My son refused to come to his mother's funeral. Instead, he called me days later, asking if her investments were worth millions. Not a word of comfort, just cold numbers. My heart cracked open in that moment. I realized I had lost not only my wife, but also my son, to greed. What he didn't know was that Linda left me 11.8 million reasons to fight back. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat in my living room that afternoon, the late sun casting long shadows across the wooden floor I had sanded with my own hands 30 years ago. The silence in the house pressed down on me like a weight I could not shake. I stared at the framed photos on the mantel, Linda smiling in her wedding dress, David at his high school graduation, the 3 of us standing in front of this very house when we first bought it. 35 years of memories. And now it all felt like a courtroom where I was the only one left to testify. My mind kept circling back to the things I had given David. I remembered writing those tuition checks, one after another, year after year. More than $60,000 was sent to the university so he could have a chance at a future brighter than mine. I remembered the pride I felt watching him cross that stage in his cap and gown, shaking the dean's hand. Back then, I thought every dollar was worth it. I thought it was an investment not just in his career, but in the bond between father and son. Then there was the car, $28,000 for that shiny sedan he said would help him drive to work, to interviews, to build his independence. I had signed the papers, handed him the keys, and felt my chest swell with love. I told him, "You're ready to start your life, son." And of course, there was the wedding. $75,000, maybe more, poured into a night that was supposed to be about love and family. I wrote the checks, paid the florist, the caterer, and the band. I stood there in the reception hall under glittering chandeliers, watching my son smile at his bride, believing I was securing his happiness. I didn't realize until much later that I had been financing the very people who would try to take everything from me. This house was never just wood and bricks. It was the one thing Linda and I built together when we had almost nothing. We scrimped and saved, putting away every spare dollar until we had enough for the down payment. $600,000. It's what it's worth now. But to me, it's worth every laugh, every fight, every Christmas morning when David tore open his presents under the tree in that very corner. The kitchen where Linda baked pies, the backyard where we grilled burgers with neighbors, the bedroom where we whispered about our future. It's not just a house. It's my life, my anchor. And now my son and his wife want to sell it. Sell it like it was just another asset on a spreadsheet. Ship me off to a nursing home, as if 35 years of sweat and love could be boxed up and shoved aside. I remembered Linda's words. She saw it before I did. "John," she said once, her voice low as we washed dishes after a Sunday dinner. "David changes when Vanessa is around. He talks differently, colder. Watch his eyes, John. He isn't the same." I brushed it off at the time, thinking she was being too harsh, too protective. But then the little things started piling up. The way David mocked the old stove in our kitchen, calling it outdated, saying Vanessa deserved better. The way he picked at the meals Linda cooked, whispering to his wife that it wasn't restaurant quality. The way they rolled their eyes at the furniture we had saved for, claiming it looked cheap. Every word was a knife, carving away at the life we had built. I should have seen it. Linda did. She tried to warn me, and now her warnings echo in my mind like thunder after a storm. The emptiness of the funeral still haunts me. Rows of empty seats, just a handful of neighbors, a few old friends. Not my son, not the man I thought would stand beside me as we laid his mother to rest. I sat there clutching the folded flag they gave me, whispering to Linda beneath my breath. "You always believed he'd come home, Linda. You said he'd remember what matters. But you were wrong." My voice cracked, tears streaming down my cheeks. I think we both were wrong. I looked around the cemetery at strangers who had more respect for my wife than her own son. That pain, no, that betrayal, settled deep in my bones. But grief has a strange way of sharpening into something else. As I sat alone at the kitchen table days later, the same table where Linda and I had shared coffee every morning for decades, I saw the stack of papers she had left for me. Insurance documents, policies, things I had never paid much attention to. My hands trembled as I flipped through them. Then I saw her handwriting, neat and steady. She had made plans. She had prepared for the day when she wouldn't be here to protect me. The life insurance, the investments. She had thought ahead. She had known, in some quiet part of her heart, that I might need armor against the very people who should have stood by me. My throat tightened. "You knew, didn't you, Linda? You knew he might betray us." Saying it out loud made me shiver, but it also made something stir inside me, a spark of strength I hadn't felt in weeks. The sorrow was still there, but it was shifting, turning into anger, turning into resolve. I could no longer sit in this chair, staring at the past, letting them write the ending to my story. My son might think I'm old, Vanessa might think I'm weak, but Linda knew better. She left me the tools. She trusted me to fight. And for the first time in days, maybe weeks, I felt like I could. I walked to the cabinet in the hallway, the one Linda always used to keep important papers. My fingers brushed against the wood, worn smooth from years of opening and closing. I pulled it open and dug through folders until I found one marked in her handwriting. Inside were bank statements, investment summaries, and a trail of accounts I had never even known existed. My pulse quickened as I read the numbers. Not just savings, not just a nest egg. Millions. $11.8 million hidden in plain sight, structured so carefully that only someone who knew where to look could find them. My knees went weak. She had built a fortress around me, around us, even as she smiled and pretended life was simple. I sat down hard on the couch, papers spread across my lap, the evening light fading through the curtains. My mind was racing, my heart pounding, every insult, every cold look from David and Vanessa, every moment of disrespect. It all made sense now. They had sniffed this out. Somehow, some way, they knew there was money. And that was why they circled me like vultures. That was why the phone calls weren't about grief, but about investments. That was why they wanted me in a nursing home, not out of care, but out of greed. I whispered into the empty room, my voice trembling but steady at the same time. "They think I'm finished, Linda. They think I'm an old man with no fight left. But they're wrong. They don't know what you left me. They don't know I've still got fire in me." I closed my eyes and let the silence answer. For the first time since her funeral, I felt Linda beside me, not in body, but in spirit. As I placed the papers back into the folder, my mind shifted from grief to strategy. The pain was still raw, but now it had purpose. I would not let them steal what Linda and I built. I would not let them erase our lives for a paycheck. Slowly, deliberately, I slid the folder back into the drawer, locked it, and pocketed the key. A small act, but a beginning. "They think the game is over," I said softly, staring at the photographs on the wall. "But it's only just begun." If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. I woke up before the sun and sat at the kitchen table with Linda's old blue mug in my hands, the one with the chipped rim she refused to throw away. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum and the clock tick. Grief still lived in my chest, heavy as a stone, but something else had taken root beside it. Resolve. The kind that makes you sit up straighter without even thinking. I whispered toward the hallway where our bedroom used to glow with morning light. "Linda, I heard you. I see what you left me. I'm going to use it." Then I picked up the phone and called the only person I trusted to make sense of what I had found. I called Richard Hale. His assistant fit me in that morning. I drove across town with both hands tight on the wheel, the folder of papers on the passenger seat, like a sleeping animal I did not want to wake. Richard's office sat on the second floor of a brick building that smelled faintly of old books and lemon polish. Diplomas lined his wall. A photograph of him shaking hands with a judge sat next to a signed baseball. It felt steady in there. It felt like the opposite of chaos. He stood when I walked in, and for the first time since the funeral, someone's eyes met mine without sliding away. "John," he said, warm and matter-of-fact, like I was a man with choices. He listened while I talked. I told him about the insurance policies in Linda's handwriting, the statements and summaries, the accounts I never knew existed. I laid the folder on his desk and watched him turn pages with a careful thumb. He asked quiet questions. He wrote notes with a black fountain pen. When he finally spoke, his voice was even, but I could hear the weight of it. "Your wife did something remarkable," he said. "Meticulous planning, multiple custodians, diversified holdings, clear instructions, and a testamentary plan that is protective." He looked up. "John, the portfolio is about $11.8 million at current value. It is structured to provide for you first, last, and always." The numbers hung in the air like a bell after a strike. 11.8. I had scraped through life, counting coupons and pinching pennies. Linda had smiled beside me and told me not to worry. Now I understood why her smile had been so steady. I rubbed my jaw and nodded. "She was smarter than me," I said, "smarter than I gave her credit for." Richard leaned forward. "There are conditions, triggers. If anyone attempts to obtain guardianship without medical necessity, if anyone pressures you to liquidate the home or move you to a facility against your will, if anyone exerts financial control by deception, the plan locks down. The assets move to a trust with independent trustees. You continue to benefit. Those acting in bad faith do not." He paused. "Your wife anticipated pressure. She documented that concern." "Pressure," I repeated, the word tasting bitter. "From my own son and his wife." My hands had stopped trembling. They were just hands again, useful tools. "What do I do first?" "Inventory and secure," he said. "We notify the custodians. We set verbal passwords. We restrict transactions without your explicit approval in writing. We place a note on your property file with the recorder's office. We review beneficiary designations. And we document any contact that smells of exploitation." He slid a form toward me. "Start here. Signature samples, initial each page. Slow is fine. We will do this carefully." I initialed, signed, and wrote my name in a dozen places with a pen that felt oddly heavy. While I worked, Richard opened a drawer and took out a large manila envelope with my name on it in Linda's small, neat print. He rested his hand on it, but did not hand it over yet. "Before you go," he said, "I have something from Linda. She asked that I give it to you when you were ready. Letters, notes, a few items that will help you remember what you already know." He tapped the envelope, then left it on his desk like a promise. "We will go through it together this afternoon if you like. For now, let me begin notifications. Do you feel up to visiting your bank branch after you leave me?" I nodded. "I do." Back in my car, I sat for a moment with the engine off, the building's brick wall filling the windshield. $11.8 million is not a number. It is a tidal wave you either surf or drown under. I put the key in the ignition. The phone in my pocket buzzed. I did not need to look to know who it was. David's name on the screen felt like a match struck in a dry room. I answered and kept my voice plain. "Dad?" he said, breathless, as if he had jogged to the phone. "Quick question. Is it true Mom had investments?" The question hit me low. No greeting. No, how are you? Just the word that unlocked his interest. Investments? Behind him, I heard a faint whisper, a woman's voice, fast and sharp. Vanessa, ask him directly. Ask if there's a trust. Ask about the house. I could almost see her hand on his arm, the way she steered him in conversations, the way a driver nudges a wheel. I am at the bank, I said, even though I was still in the parking lot. I kept my words steady, like laying bricks. Now is not a good time. Dad, I just want to help you understand everything, he said quickly. Mom wasn't great with money, you know. It would be smart if I looked at things, just to make sure no one takes advantage. Linda is not great with money. My jaw tightened. I looked down at my hands on the steering wheel. I will be fine, I said. We can talk later. Silence on the line for a beat. Then his voice came back smoother, too smooth. Of course, sure, later, maybe tonight. Vanessa says hi. The call ended. I stared through the windshield for another slow count of 5. In the quiet car, I could hear my own heartbeat. They smelled money. They would circle until they saw a path. I put the car in gear and drove. The bank branch looked exactly as it had every Saturday for decades. Same potted plants, same bulletin board with photos from the 4th of July parade. I had opened our first account there when David was 5 and needed a place for his paper route cash. The assistant manager recognized me at once and brought me into a small glassed-in office where the air smelled faintly of toner and carpet cleaner. Her name tag said Priya Patel. She shook my hand and did not rush me. How can we help today, Mr. Whitman? I took out the folder and placed it on the desk. My wife passed recently, I said. I need to review every account associated with our names. I need to restrict access. I need to place notes, and I need to confirm the safe deposit box. She listened without interrupting, then pulled her keyboard closer. I am very sorry for your loss, she said, and I believed her. Let us go step by step. I will print a consolidated list. The printer hummed. She slid a stack of pages across the desk. Checking. Savings. A money market account with a balance that made my eyes widen, just under $320,000. 2 CDs rolling in 6 months. A safe deposit box in our joint names. I gave her the death certificate copy I had in my folder. She copied it, handed it back, and explained how joint accounts would function now, what documents would be needed for accounts solely in Linda's name, and how beneficiary designations controlled transfer on death. I want transaction alerts on everything, I said. Text and email. I want a verbal password required for in-person withdrawals above $1,000. I gave her a phrase only Linda would have guessed. It felt like a small guard dog at the door. Done, she said, typing. We can also place a note about potential elder financial exploitation. That flags unusual activity and requires manager review. Would you like that? Yes, place the note. She took me downstairs to the vault. The safe deposit attendant knew the quiet drill, clipboards, keys, and a private room with a metal table. The box slid open. Inside, the little private world Linda had curated. Birth certificates in plastic sleeves, our marriage license, the title to the car, a short stack of savings bonds I had forgotten about, and a smaller envelope with my name. I did not open it there. I placed it gently back in the box and closed the lid. Some things needed a kitchen table and an afternoon to breathe. Back upstairs, Ms. Patel printed receipts for every change and clipped them neatly. One more thing, I said. Is there any note in my file about visitors inquiring? My son has a habit of asking questions without authorization. She scanned. We do not disclose account information without authorization, she said, and then paused. There is a log entry from yesterday of someone calling to ask about standard procedures for transferring joint accounts on death. They did not receive specific information. The caller did not identify themselves. I looked at the date and the time. It lined up with the call I had missed during dinner last night. My stomach went cool and even. That will be all, I said. You have been more help than you know. Outside, the air felt brighter. The world had not changed, but I had. I sat in the car, scrolled through my phone, and called the broker listed on one of Linda's statements. A live person answered. We ran through security questions. I asked for a full activity report. I asked for trading restrictions that required my written approval. The agent suggested an added layer, a verbal code, and two-factor confirmations before any wire transfers. Yes, I said. All of it? I wrote the confirmation numbers on the back of a grocery receipt. Then I called the second firm. The same process. A flag for potential coercion. A note that no third party had any authority. When the representative asked if I wanted a recorded notation that I suspected undue influence, I said the word out loud for the first time. Yes, I said. Influence. Suspected. Note it. I drove to the county recorder's office and met a clerk with tired eyes and a smile like a porch light. I told her I wanted to record a notice regarding my wife's death and confirmed that no deeds had been filed on my property without my knowledge. She tapped at her screen and shook her head. Nothing new, she said. You are clear. I filed the affidavit and asked to be notified if any attempt to record a deed hit the system. The clerk wrote my number down carefully and told me she would put a watch note on the parcel. It felt like putting bars on the windows. Maybe it would never be needed. The point was that it was there. Back home, I set a legal pad on the kitchen table and drew 2 columns. Left side, what I knew. Right side, what I did not. I listed dates, times, balances, and names. I listed the last time my son had said he loved me without looking at his wife first. The pages filled. I turned it over and kept writing. When the phone rang again, the sound did not make me jump. I let it buzz once, twice, then answered. "Dad, did you get my message?" David asked, and the bouncy tone in his voice told me he thought he had found the right key for the wrong lock. "Vanessa says we should all sit down and go over Mom's accounts. We can take the pressure off you." Pressure. There was that word again, now in my son's mouth. I kept my voice even, unhurried. "I have already met with counsel," I said. "Everything is handled." A small silence, then a bright laugh. "Counsel? Dad, you do not need a lawyer. We are family. Lawyers make things complicated." "You have plans tonight?" I asked, not answering his point. "I am busy." He exhaled, the sound more hiss than breath. "We are trying to help you," he said, the veneer slipping a little. "You are alone in that old house. This is not the time to get stubborn." I looked at the window over the sink, the sun sliding down behind the maple. "I am exactly as stubborn as I need to be," I said, and ended the call before the next sentence in his script. I set the phone on the table and let the quiet settle. I did not feel cruel. I felt clear. The day stretched into late afternoon. Richard called to say he had completed the first round of notifications and to come by if I felt up to it. I drove back as the sky turned the soft color of worn denim. His office looked the same, but something in me had shifted a few degrees. I was not a man dragged by events anymore. I was a man who made a list and worked it. Richard greeted me with a nod and slid the manila envelope across the desk. "For you," he said. "Open at your own pace. There are letters, copies of messages, and one contact card." He tapped the corner of the envelope. "She thought you might need help seeing what is in front of you." I took a breath and opened the envelope. On top lay Linda's handwriting. My name starts with the first letter. Inside, her voice flowed back to me, steady, loving, unafraid. She wrote about faith and caution. She wrote about how people show you who they are when there is money in the room. She wrote that she believed I would do the right thing even when it hurt. Beneath the letters lay printouts of text messages I had never seen, little bubbles of words from David I would have sworn were not his. Cold sentences about what the house could sell for in this market. A note about leveraging Dad's confusion. A line from Vanessa that made my stomach drop. Something about guardianship is faster if he resists. I felt my face go warm and then cool again. I passed a page to Richard. He read it once and set it down slowly. "There is one more item," he said, reaching into the envelope and producing a business card. Plain white. A name. Michael Torres. Underneath, the word investigator. "If you decide you want context, he may provide it. Your wife asked me to hold this until you had decided to act." I ran my thumb over the ink and slid the card back into the envelope. I did not know Michael Torres. I did not know if I wanted to. What I knew, with a clarity I could feel in my bones, was that I was done being cornered. I was done being polite when wolves smiled at my door. On my way out, I signed 2 more forms. One authorized Richard to receive any contact from my son or his wife and to document it. The second directed the brokerages to send duplicate statements to his office and to require his acknowledgement on any large movement of funds. The pen felt lighter now. My signature looked like it belonged to a man with a spine. Dusk had settled by the time I pulled into my driveway. I stood for a moment by the mailbox and looked at the front porch where Linda and I had sat on summer nights with our bare feet on the steps. The porch light flicked on automatically. I unlocked the door, walked straight to the kitchen, and set the envelope on the table. I did not turn on the radio. I did not fill the silence with anything but my own breath. I made tea. I opened the second envelope from the safe deposit box. Inside were 4 things. A faded photo of the 3 of us at the beach with David on Linda's shoulders. A small brass key I did not recognize. A list of account numbers with the last 4 digits marked in blue ink. And a note that said, in Linda's careful hand, "Do not let them decide who you are. Decide it yourself." I held that note for a long time. Then I placed it by the salt shaker where I would see it every morning. I took the list of accounts and compared it to the reports Richard had requested. I circled 2 items and wrote questions for tomorrow. I held the brass key up to the kitchen light and decided I would ask Richard if it matched any lock at his office or if perhaps Linda had rented a secondary box somewhere else. Every answer opened 2 new doors. That used to scare me. Tonight, it felt like oxygen. The phone buzzed one more time. A text from David. A simple line. "We can be there on Saturday. Let's make decisions as a family." I stared at the words until they blurred, then typed a reply that said only, "Saturday will not work. I have counsel. All decisions go through him." I hit send and turned the phone face down. In the living room, the shadows had softened. I looked at our wedding photo on the mantel and spoke into the quiet like a man at church. "They think I am weak," I said. "They think I am alone. They think this house is a number, and I am a signature they can push. They are wrong." My voice did not rise. It did not need to. Truth does not shout. It stands. Before I went to bed, I did 3 more things that seemed small from the outside and enormous from where I stood. I changed the code on the alarm system and wrote it in my pocket notebook. I moved the manila envelope into the old bread box Linda kept on top of the fridge because no thief thinks to look where flour used to live. And I slid a chair under the doorknob the way my father had taught me when storms rattled the windows. Not because I was afraid, because I was done being careless with what mattered. In the dark, I lay on my side and watched the faint glow around the curtains. Sleep did not come easily. Memories came instead. The soft scrape of Linda's slippers on the hall floor. The whisper of David's small voice asking for one more story. The sound of my son as a man telling me over the phone that I was being dramatic. That word curled like smoke against the ceiling. Dramatic. Fine. Let them think it. Let them laugh as they print out brochures for a nursing home and make lists of what our furniture might fetch on a resale site. Let them rest easy tonight, certain that I am in the dark. They have no idea I spent the day placing locks on doors they have never seen. When the clock struck 11, I pushed the covers back and sat up. I wrote one last line on my legal pad. Call the recorder's office again. Confirm watch note on deed. Then I added another. Ask Richard about the emergency injunction. I capped my pen and set it on the table. The house creaked the way old houses do when they are settling into the night. I listened to it like a friend breathing. "Linda," I said into the dark, my voice small and sure. "I am not letting them write the ending. I am writing it." The room did not answer. It did not need to. I knew what came next. "Tomorrow I will take the envelope back to Richard. Tomorrow I will ask about injunctions and trusts and what to do if my son arrives with a doctor and a clipboard. Tomorrow I would call the number on Michael Torres's business card, even though the idea of calling a stranger made my stomach flutter. Tomorrow I would be a man who acted, not a man who hoped. I lay down again and let the day replay in a slow reel. Meeting, signatures, vault, calls, flags, notes. A son who did not say "I'm sorry," only "Is it true?" A wife's letters that turned grief into a blade I could hold without cutting myself. I closed my eyes and saw Linda's handwriting on the note by the salt shaker. "Do not let them decide who you are. Decide it yourself." I decided. They wanted me cornered. They wanted me tired. They wanted me to be grateful for their version of help. Instead, I had a lawyer who answered his phone. I had a banker who placed flags on my accounts. I had county records that would not shift under my feet without a call. I had an envelope that hummed with my wife's faith. And I had one last thing no one could take, not with tricks, not with pressure, not with a court order whispered in my ear while I stood on my own porch. I had time to prepare, time to plan, time to let them step a little closer and show themselves. I drifted at last into a sleep that did not feel like falling. It felt like resting my legs before the next day's climb. In the morning, I would shave, put on a clean shirt, and drive back to Richard's office with the envelope buckled into the passenger seat. I would sign what he put in front of me. I would ask questions until I understood. And when I left, I would have in my briefcase a thin stack of paper with the weight of a mountain. Orders, restrictions, a plan. They thought they had the only map. They thought they knew every turn. They did not know Linda drew lines on a chart I had not looked at until today. They did not know I could read it. When I finally turned off the bedside lamp, the room went quiet enough to hear the maple leaves move in the night breeze. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked and then settled. I smiled in the dark without meaning to. The smile surprised me. It did not come from happiness. It came from recognition, from that clean, solid place you find when you have decided to stand. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. A knock on the door. A soft voice pretending concern. The rustle of paper. The chilly comfort of a lawyer's conference room. It did not matter. I had already crossed the line between being on my heels and on my toes. If they came with kindness, I would hear the truth underneath it. If they came with threats, I would show them the envelope. If they came with a doctor and a clipboard, I would introduce them to my attorney and to the conditions my wife stitched into the law, like her name into the hem of a quilt. I closed my eyes one last time. The last thought that moved through me was not angry. It was clean. They think I have lost. They are wrong. They think I am alone. They are wrong. They think the house is a number, the accounts are a prize, and I am a door that swings at a push. They are wrong. They do not know what I hold in my hands. They do not know what is in the envelope on the kitchen table. They do not know what I will do when the moment comes. They will. And when they do, it will be too late to change their plan. Too late to soften their words. Too late to pretend they came for love and not for money. The pieces were already on the board, and for the first time since Linda left, I could see more than one move ahead. I could feel the shape of the next day settling into place, the way you feel a door open down a hallway you have walked 100 times. I breathed in. I breathed out. They think I lost, I whispered into the dark, but the game just started. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. They came on a Saturday. I heard the car doors slam and the fast shuffle of expensive shoes on my walkway. I was in the kitchen, standing at the counter where Linda used to roll out pie dough, listening to the kettle click as it cooled. Through the sheer curtain, I saw David's shoulders squared like he was marching into a meeting. Vanessa walked a half step in front of him, chin high, eyes scanning, a glossy binder against her chest. I did not move to the door right away. I took one slow breath. Then I went to meet them. David hugged me without really touching me. "Dad," he said, voice bright. Vanessa stepped inside with that perfume I have always thought smelled like cold flowers. She smiled the way people smile in a photograph they want to control. "We brought coffee," she said, lifting a cardboard carrier. "Your favorite." I took it and set it on the hall table and watched her eyes travel up and down my walls. Family photos, the old clock, the framed picture of Linda holding David when he was a baby. Vanessa's gaze did not land on any of them for long. She was measuring the living room the way a person measures a room before a sale. "Let's sit," I said, and led them to the couch. I sat in my chair. The cushion had my shape. It gave under me with a familiar sigh. Everything in that room knew me. The carpet, the books, the light. Vanessa cleared her throat and set the glossy binder on her knees as if she were unveiling a gift. "We did some research for you," she said. She flipped the cover back and fanned out brochures. Smiling couples on patios, pools, fitness classes, a chapel. "Luxury senior communities in Chicago," she said. "Around Lakeview, River North, places with excellent medical staff, chef-designed meals, transportation, safety." I picked up one brochure, a photo of a sunlit dining room, and a note in small print, from $8,500 per month. I set it down. "You did this recently," I said. "We want you to be comfortable," Vanessa said, and touched David's hand like a reminder of whose idea this was. "Close to us. Where can we take care of you?" I looked at my son. He looked at the carpet. "Dad, you should not be alone in this big place," he said, rolling the words like marbles he could not quite hold. "It is a lot to manage. The stairs, the yard, the bills." "This house has stairs I built," I said. "This yard grows grass I planted." The words were steady. They surprised me with how easy they came. Vanessa's smile did not bend. "We can sell this house while the market is still strong," she said gently, like a nurse. $600,000 is a lot of equity to leave sitting. We know this is hard, but it is time to be practical. I waited until the quiet sat down with us. "Practical," I repeated, and just let the word be a word. In that small pause, I saw it. The plan, the prep, the practiced lines. Their eyes flicked to each other, quick as birds. The doorbell rang. I was not surprised. I had seen 2 other cars stop behind theirs. When I opened the door, the hallway filled with the smell of paper and cologne and something sharper. A man with a leather briefcase stood up straight like a flagpole. "Mr. Whitman," he said, and offered a card. "David Walsh. I represent your son and his wife in a guardianship matter." Behind him stood a woman with neat hair and a clipboard. "Dr. Reeves," she said, "geriatric psychiatry." A third person hung back, a tired-looking social worker with a thin tie and a frown already printed on his face. David spoke quickly. "Dad, this is just a wellness check, to be sure you are safe, to help with decisions." Vanessa clasped her hands, eyes warm and empty. "We care," she said. My chest was calm. I did not feel my heart pound. I felt something else, lower and steadier. I had known they would try to come with force, wrapped in concern. I had known because Linda knew. I opened the door wider and stepped aside. "You can wait in the living room," I said. "I need to make a call." In the kitchen, I dialed Richard. He answered on the first ring. "We are here," he said. 2 minutes." I ended the call, took the envelope from the bread box, and set it on the kitchen table. I ran my palm over the thick paper like it was a back I loved. Then I walked back into the living room and took my seat. Attorney Walsh began with a practiced tone. "Sir, your son reports concerns regarding your ability to manage complex financial matters in the wake of your wife's passing. We are here under a temporary order to conduct a competency screening. If you cooperate, this will be brief." I looked at David. "Concerns," I said. "My son has concerns." Walsh glanced at his clipboard. "There are significant assets at issue," he said, "including this residence, valued at approximately $600,000, and investment accounts that may exceed several million. The risk of loss is high absent proper oversight." My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I did not need to look. Headlights washed across my wall. I stood and went to the door and let Richard in. He was not alone. Beside him walked a man with a quiet face and a notepad, Michael Torres. Behind them, a uniformed officer from the Financial Crimes Unit stepped in and stood to the side with his hands folded, not threatening, just present. The room felt different immediately, like air after a window opens. Richard shook my hand. "Good morning," he said, as if we were starting something simple. He introduced himself to Walsh, then to the others. He handed the officer a sealed folder. "Notice of representation," he said, and turned to the psychiatrist. "Doctor, any interview of my client will be recorded and will occur only after we see the signed order." Walsh bristled. "There is no need to escalate," he said. "We are here for a screening, for Mr. Whitman's safety." Richard's voice did not rise. "Safety is exactly why we are here. Produce the order." Walsh pulled out a single page stamped with a rubber seal, not a judge's signature. The officer looked down, then up, and shook his head. "Administrative note," he said, "not an order. You do not have court authority to compel anything today." He handed it back. Walsh's mouth opened, then closed. Vanessa's lips pressed into a white line. Richard set a thin stack of papers on my coffee table. The top page had Linda's handwriting where she had signed, months ago, in front of a notary. He spoke as if reading a grocery list. "Mr. Whitman is the sole beneficiary of his late wife's estate. Under the protective provisions of her testamentary plan, any attempt to obtain guardianship without medical necessity, any attempt to coerce a sale of the marital residence, or to manipulate fiduciary control triggers immediate transfer of the portfolio to an irrevocable trust with independent trustees. Those terms were filed and acknowledged by the custodians yesterday. This morning, your arrival with counsel, a psychiatrist, and a social worker to discuss guardianship was logged by me and by the bank. The condition is met." He slid a second page forward. "This is a notice that the trust has activated." The words landed like a door closing softly. David blinked. "What does that mean?" he asked, because he did not understand the game he was playing. "It means," Richard said, patient, "that the assets are beyond your reach. Mr. Whitman will be supported by the trust according to his wife's instructions. No one here will control or liquidate anything without his consent and the trustee's approval. If you contest the plan in bad faith, your contingent inheritance will be reduced to $1. That is also in writing." Vanessa laughed, a small brittle sound. "You cannot cut family out like that," she said. "The court will never let—" "The court will follow the document," Richard said. "Your opinion is not relevant." Michael Torres did not speak until then. He opened a folder and laid out photographs the way a careful dealer lays cards. He spoke quietly. "Ms. Vanessa Carter," he said, "also known as Vanessa Cole in Sacramento County records, and Vanessa Reed in Travis County records. Prior marriages to older men with documented estates. Divorce settlements are favorable to you. A petition for guardianship was filed for Mr. Hargrove, which was withdrawn after a bank investigation. A complaint for undue influence in another case that settled privately." He slid a printed chain of text messages across the table, copies Linda had stored, now time-stamped. Lines about guardianship, about selling a house quickly, about keeping Dad off balance. Vanessa's face did something strange. It went soft and then hard, like clay that has been pressed. "This is an invasion," she said, reaching for the papers. Michael placed his hand on the edge and did not let go. The officer shifted his weight, not much, just enough to make the window glass seem thinner. Walsh tried to gather himself. "Even if any of that were relevant," he said, turning to me, "it does not change the fact that you might be at risk. There are significant sums, $11.8 million if your attorney is to be believed. We just want to help make wise decisions. Wise decisions, I said, hearing my voice and liking the sound of it. Like the brochures for Chicago? $8,500 a month? Paid out of my account so you can live close to my money? David's face went red. Dad, that is not fair, he said too quickly. We thought— You thought I was tired, I said. You thought I was alone. You thought the house was a number and I was a signature. You did not think I would read. You did not think your mother had a plan. I leaned forward and tapped the manila envelope. She did? Richard lifted a small recorder and pressed play. Linda's voice filled my living room, warm, clear, unafraid. Vanessa, Linda said on the recording, stop telling my son to put his father in a facility. If you are worried about him, then visit. Bring soup. Do not bring contracts. Then Vanessa's voice, unmistakable, low, and impatient. He will sign whatever if you make it sound like safety. Men his age do. Houses do not need sentiment. They need sellers. David's head dropped like someone had cut a string. Vanessa stood up. This is taken out of context, she said. I was trying to help. Your mother was confused. She misheard me. She recorded the entire conversation, Richard said. Context is the part where you explained how to phrase concerns to a doctor to get a competency note. We have that too. The room got very quiet. The old clock ticked. Outside, a car drove by slowly, if it knew better than to make noise. Vanessa's eyes darted to David, to Walsh, to the door. She gathered the brochures with quick fingers, then let them fall when she saw the officer watching her hands. Her voice lost its sweetness. It came back thin and sharp. This is a witch hunt, she said. You cannot keep a man from his own father. You cannot just— I can keep myself, I said, and my voice surprised me again with how steady it was. I can keep my house. I can keep the life your mother and I built. That is what is happening here. Not a witch hunt. A line. Walsh tried for one last swing. You cannot activate a trust on a whim, he said. We have remedies. You will file whatever you like, Richard said with a small nod. And you will lose. Michael slid one last page across the table to David alone. You should see this, he said. It is a timeline, not gossip, dates, calls, inquiries. A log from your wife's search history about guardianship templates. A call yesterday from your number to your father's bank asking about transfer on death procedures. The bank recorded the call. David looked at the page. I watched his eyes stumble over his name. Something behind his face gave way. His lips trembled a little. He looked older, and not in a way that made me feel tender, in a way that made me feel the weight of choices. Vanessa, he said, and his voice cracked on the second syllable. She turned on him. Do not be weak now, she whispered. We are in this. Stay in it. He looked at me, and for a flicker I saw the boy he had been when he was 8 and scraped his knee and wanted me to tell him it would stop hurting. He opened his mouth like he might say, sorry. He closed it again. I did not speak for him. This was a moment he had to own by himself or let fall. The officer stepped forward just enough to be noticed. I am opening a file, he said quietly. Attempted elder exploitation is a crime in this state. If you keep pressing for control after today, counsel will hear from us. If you attempt to move or hide assets, we will hear from the banks. If you attempt to compel a medical opinion by deception, you will regret it. Oh. Walsh gathered his briefcase. We are leaving, he said. His face had the gray look of a man who had just realized his map was wrong. Dr. Reeves tucked her clipboard to her chest and nodded to me with something like respect. The social worker said nothing. He had seen this kind of scene before. He knew the smell of it. Vanessa did not move. She stared at me and the manila envelope like they were a trick box she had failed to crack. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and mean. You think this is over? She said. It is not. Everyone gets old. Everyone needs someone. Remember that when your trustees decide what you can spend? I stood. "I will not forget," I said. "I will also not forget who brought brochures to my living room before my wife's flowers were dry." She flinched. It was small, but I saw it. Then she brushed invisible dust from her sleeve and walked to the door, heels clicking too loud on my wood floor, as if she could drill holes with sound. David followed, eyes on the rug, and for 1 second by the doorway he hesitated, like a man about to reach for a hand and thinking better of it. He did not look back. When the door shut behind them, the house breathed. The clock ticked again like a friend clearing his throat. I sat down. Richard set a hand on the envelope. "We will file our notices this afternoon," he said. "We will send cease and desist letters. The trustees have already confirmed activation. Your home is your home." Michael closed his folder. "If they come back," he said, "call me first, then call the officer. Do not open the door if the doctor is standing there. You do not have to play their game." I nodded. The room felt larger, like the walls had shifted outward by an inch. I poured coffee into Linda's blue mug and took a slow sip. It was too strong. It tasted right. Richard stood to go. He stopped by the mantel and looked at our wedding photo. "She planned well," he said, "but you stood up. That is not in her papers. That is you." I walked them to the porch. The maple leaves moved in the small wind. The street looked ordinary again. When their cars pulled away, I stayed on the steps a long time, breathing air that felt like it had been cleaned. Later, as the light changed to late afternoon and the house settled into its familiar sounds, my phone pinged. A message from David. No words, just a single line of dots that did not become a sentence. Then another text. "I am sorry." It sat there, thin and pale. Not a confession, not a repair. It did not move me to answer. I put the phone face down and went back to the kitchen table. I opened the envelope and read Linda's letter again. I could hear her voice in the turns of the sentences. I could feel her hand in the choices she made to protect me. At the bottom of the page, she had written one line that had not hit me the first time. "If they force your hand, do not be afraid to show them what you have." I smiled, a small, tired smile that felt like it belonged to me. I walked to the front door and locked it for the night. I turned off the living room lamp and stood for a moment in the soft dark. Words rose inside me, not because I needed to say them, but because they wanted out. "You thought I was weak," I said into the stillness, "but Linda prepared me for this." The quiet did not answer, but something in my chest did. It loosened. It let in a little light. Before I went to bed, I wrote a single sentence on a fresh page of my legal pad. "Tomorrow I will decide what peace looks like." The line sat there like a promise I could keep. Feeling dismissed and used by your own family is hard, isn't it? If you believe every person deserves to be seen and treated with justice, comment the keyword, justice. Now let's see what they do to change that. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. The days after that storm in my living room felt different, almost quiet in a way that made me realize how much tension I had been carrying in my chest. The fight was over, at least the loud part. Richard and Michael had done their work, the trust had locked everything down, and the authorities had enough evidence against Vanessa to move. When the papers came, thick with official stamps and clipped with court orders, I sat at my kitchen table and read them slowly. Fraud, wire transfer manipulation, undue influence. She was indicted and taken into custody within a week. 12 years, the prosecutor said, maybe more, depending on what else surfaced. I did not cheer, I did not clap my hands or pour a drink. I just folded the paper and set it in the drawer where Linda used to keep the holiday napkins. Justice, when it comes, is not loud. It is steady. It settles on your shoulders like a coat you can finally wear without shame. David called me that same night, his voice hoarse, like he had been crying or yelling. He spoke too fast at first, telling me he had nothing to do with Vanessa's schemes, that he was blindsided, that he was ashamed. He begged me not to believe what people were saying at his office. I listened, but I did not hurry to rescue him with words. When he paused, I finally said, "If you want a father, come with love. If you want money, don't come at all." There was silence on the line. Then he whispered, "I don't know if I can undo what I've done." The phone buzzed and the call ended. The papers reported what came next. David's colleagues at the firm cut him out of deals. Clients backed away. One headline read, "Local attorney under cloud after family scandal." I knew the weight of shame. I had carried it myself when I lost jobs in my younger days. But his shame was different. It was the price of betrayal. I spent those first weeks after the court hearing tending to my house. I polished the wood floors Linda and I had chosen in the summer of 1985 when we pulled up carpet with our bare hands. I wiped the dust off the frame of our wedding photo. I opened the old cedar chest where Linda kept her quilts and aired them out in the sun. Every piece of fabric, every nail, every corner carried her. For a long time, the house had felt like a burden, like a stage for a cruel play. But now it became mine again and hers, without the shadow of theft hovering over it. I sat with Richard at his office and signed the final stack of documents that secured the trust. $11.8 million in investments, accounts, and property. The number sat on the page like a mountain. It did not feel like wealth. It felt like responsibility. Linda had always said money shows who you really are. Now it was showing me. I told Richard I wanted to carve out $2 million for something Linda once whispered about when she thought I was half asleep. A fund for children without families. A place where they could find safety, education, and a roof over their heads. She believed in that, I said. Richard smiled, not the lawyer's smile, but the human one. Then that's exactly what we'll do. Back home, I began teaching myself to cook. It started with eggs, then stew, then pies like the ones Linda had rolled on this very counter. My first crust was tough, almost leathery, but the smell filled the house with something warm. I left one pie on the neighbor's porch with a note that said, "Too much for one man." They rang my bell that night with tears in their eyes, telling me no one had ever done something so thoughtful for them since their mother passed. That's when I realized, kindness multiplies when you let it. David called again, weeks later. His tone was softer. He said he was sorry. He said he had been blind, foolish, and proud. He said he did not know how to ask me to forgive him. I listened. Then I said, "Forgiveness isn't a check you can cash. It's not about money. If you want to come back into my life, you'll need to bring respect. You'll need to bring love. That's the only currency I take now." He cried. I did not hang up this time, but I did not open the door either. Some fences stay up even when the gate creaks. Vanessa, meanwhile, disappeared from the glossy parties she used to post about. Her name was dragged through every court docket. Fraud is an ugly word in black print. She will wear that word for a long time. 12 years is a heavy sentence. Some people will still believe her charm, but most will not. I do not need revenge. Time will do the rest. My own days grew lighter. I took morning walks to the park with a thermos of coffee. I sat on the bench near the fountain and fed sparrows with breadcrumbs. The children ran across the grass, their laughter carrying, and I thought about Linda's wish for those who had nothing. Soon, the fund in her name would start helping kids who had no bench to sit on, no father to guide them. That thought steadied me. I began attending the community center down the street. They had classes, book clubs, and even a gardening circle. One evening, I joined a group that cooked meals for veterans. My hands peeled potatoes while others chopped carrots. We shared stories, not of money or betrayal, but of small kindnesses, the kind that keep people alive when the world forgets them. For the first time in months, I laughed, really laughed, with people who wanted nothing from me but my company. The house is still worth $600,000, maybe more by now, but I no longer think of it as a prize to be guarded. It is my shelter, my anchor, and one day it will go where Linda wanted it to. Until then, it is the place I stand and breathe. Every creak in the floorboard says, I belong here. The hardest part was learning to release anger. Anger is a stone. If you carry it too long, it makes you stoop. One night I sat alone in the living room, the lamp casting a soft yellow light. I whispered, "Linda, I'm tired of being angry. I'm ready to let it go." The silence felt like her hand squeezing mine. For the first time, I slept through the night without waking in a sweat. The lesson is simple, but it took me a lifetime to write it down. Money does not measure love. Love is measured in respect, in showing up, in kindness when no one is watching. Wealth is not the number in your account, but the people who stand by you when storms hit. Family by blood can betray you. Family by heart never does. So I live quieter now, stronger, free. I do not need to prove myself to David or to Vanessa or to anyone else who mistook me for a weak old man. I know my worth. I know what Linda saw when she built her plans around me. Next week, the community center is starting a project I signed up for. We're building a reading room for kids who don't have books at home. I'll carry wood. I'll paint the walls. I'll tell stories if they let me. I think Linda would like that. She always said giving is the only way to keep what matters. The phone still rings sometimes, and I see David's name on the screen. Sometimes I answer. Sometimes I don't. The choice is mine now. That's the real victory. Boundaries are freedom in disguise. As I sit at my kitchen table tonight, the one Linda polished with lemon oil every spring, I look around and see not betrayal, not loss, but survival. I am still here, whole, wealthy in ways that cannot be counted. And as the clock ticks, steady and certain, I whisper once more, not for anyone else to hear but myself. I don't need them anymore. I have myself. And that, at last, feels like peace. Tomorrow I'll walk to the community center and meet new friends. Maybe I'll start a new project. Maybe I'll discover a new part of life. Whatever it is, it will not be built on betrayal, but on choice. That's the chapter I'm ready to write next. I moved into the new place in early spring. The air was still sharp in the mornings, but by noon the sun poured through the big window in the living room and lit the oak floors until they shone like honey. The condo cost $200,000, nothing close to the $600,000 house I left behind, but it was enough, more than enough. The balcony looked out over the park, and every afternoon I could hear children shouting and chasing each other, their voices carrying up to me like music. For the first time in years, I felt peace in a space that was mine alone, untainted by betrayal. I unpacked slowly, one box at a time. I placed Linda's wedding ring in a small glass dish by the bed, the same place she used to leave it when she cooked or gardened. I hung her favorite quilt, the blue and white one she stitched during our 30th anniversary, across the back of the couch. Each item was a piece of her, but in this new place, they no longer felt like reminders of loss. They felt like blessings. I whispered once, holding that ring, "Linda, you still protect me, and I finally protect myself." I started attending community meetings at the local center. With part of the inheritance Linda left, I created a small community fund, $500,000, earmarked for after-school programs and food drives. The paperwork called it the Whitman Fund, but I called it Linda's Promise. Seeing the kids draw pictures with crayons paid for by the fund, watching them run into classrooms with books waiting for them, it was like she was smiling through their laughter. My life was no longer defined by what David and Vanessa had tried to take. It was defined by what Linda and I chose to give. Sometimes people ask me about my son. They had read the papers, heard about Vanessa's trial, seen David's name in the footnotes of Scandal. I told them the truth. He's living his own life now. Mine is here. David rented a one-bedroom apartment across town, barely keeping up with bills after losing his firm. He sent letters, long, rambling things filled with apologies, promises, pleas. I read one or two, then stopped. I never wrote back. One evening, as I held one of his unopened envelopes in my hand, I said out loud, "I don't need their apologies. I have my own life now." And I dropped it into a drawer where it stayed. The contrast could not have been sharper. While I spent mornings tending a small herb garden on the balcony, David was chasing landlords for extensions and watching old friends cross the street to avoid him. Vanessa, meanwhile, was still facing the full weight of her sentence. 12 years was a long road. She wrote nothing, not to me, not even to David. Silence was her answer, and perhaps her only dignity left. It is strange how betrayal changes shape with time. At first it is sharp, cutting, unbearable. Then it dulls into anger, heavy and exhausting. But if you carry it long enough and put it down carefully, it turns into something else, a lesson, a warning, maybe even a gift. For me it became clear. I have learned lessons I wish I had known decades earlier. To parents I say this: love your children, but do not let that love blind you. Set boundaries. Teach them gratitude, not entitlement. Do not give everything just because they ask. Love is not proven by the size of your wallet, but by the size of your example. To children, I say, do not let greed bury the love that raised you. Remember the nights your parents worked 2 jobs to pay tuition, the meals they skipped so you could eat. A fortune stolen will never fill the emptiness left when trust is broken. Money runs out. Love, once lost, does not come back so easily. And to all of us, living in this noisy, modern world, character is the only inheritance that cannot be stolen. Bank accounts rise and fall, houses crumble, fortunes change hands. But if you have honesty, respect, and dignity, you have wealth greater than any number written on paper. That is what I carry with me now, more than the millions locked safely away. One afternoon in June, while sitting in the park beneath a sycamore tree, I received a small surprise. A young woman approached me holding a notebook. She said she was part of the community center, writing down stories of elders in the neighborhood. She asked if I would share something from my life. I hesitated, then told her about Linda, about how she wanted children to have a safe place to learn, about how she believed giving was the only way to keep what mattered. The girl scribbled quickly, her eyes wide. When she finished, she smiled and said, "Your story will help more people than you know." That evening, walking back to my condo, I realized that Linda's voice lived on, not just in me, but in strangers who carried her words forward. That moment reminded me that even small events can shape big truths. Betrayal had nearly broken me, but choosing to give had rebuilt me stronger. The unexpected note from a stranger was proof. We do not control how others treat us, but we control how we answer. Now I wake each morning with lighter shoulders. I brew coffee, water the herbs, and sometimes bake a pie for the neighbors. I no longer wait for David to call, and I no longer dread the silence that follows when he does. The past is closed. The future belongs to me. I end my night sitting on the balcony, holding Linda's ring between my fingers. The city lights glow, the park hums softly, and I think to myself, I finally found where I belong. And as I place the ring gently back into its dish, I know with certainty, the truest inheritance is not money, not houses, not titles. It is the strength to stand tall, the courage to draw boundaries, and the grace to choose peace over bitterness. I will not answer David's letters. I will not wait for Vanessa's release. My story is no longer tied to theirs. My story is here, in this condo, in this park, in every child who picks up a book paid for by Linda's promise. That is enough, more than enough. And so I close this chapter with a heart steady and clear. Family is not only blood. Family is respect, trust, and love. Character is the one treasure no one can steal. And I have it. Finally, completely. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.